Have you wondered why we do not have any negative votes in our elections? Shouldn't we be able to explicitly express our negative feelings for a candidate in a free democracy? Instead, our voting system requires us to mask our negative feelings and support a different candidate. The simplest and most widely used voting system is the plurality voting method. Each voter votes for exactly one candidate, and the candidate who receives the most votes would win. Imagine the situation with four candidates A, B, C, and D, and among them, let's say A and B are perceived to be the strong candidates based on general opinion polls. Now, most voters wouldn't want to waste their vote on a weaker candidate like C, even if they like C, and hence they would be forced to support either A or B. A being a strong candidate, there would be many ardent supporters, but there would also be many haters who would not want A to win at any cost. Some of this group might actually support candidate C, but they would dare not vote for C because C is perceived to be weaker. Hence, they would compromise and vote for B, who has a much higher chance of defeating A. Similarly, the haters of B would naturally be pushed into voting for A. These two dissenting groups would mutually feed into the opposite camps and artificially reinforce the idea that A and B are indeed the strong candidates. This is the classic case of strategic voting, wherein the voters don't honestly express their preferences. Furthermore, this system provides a big incentive for A and B to indulge in polarizing and divisive campaign rhetorics to smear each other, just so that they can capture more of the opponent haters. All this would eliminate the chances of a good third party candidate to emerge. This was aptly observed by Duverger that plurality voting method will inevitably lead to a two-party system. There are better voting methods that would soften this problem, like the ranked voting method, the approval voting method. These methods certainly capture the voter preferences in much more detail, so they are definitely better than the plurality method, but they do not explicitly capture the negative preferences of voters in a quantitative fashion. We shall compare and contrast these voting systems with negative voting in a separate video whose link is given in the description below. But the focus here is primarily on the negative voting. What I mean by negative voting here is the haters of A would be allowed to explicitly cast negative votes for A that would directly reduce the chances of A winning, and they don't have to artificially support B with positive votes. Instead, they can support their preferred candidate C with positive votes. Similarly, the haters of B can explicitly cast negative votes for B rather than artificially casting positive votes for A. But we have to exercise caution while introducing such negative votes in our voting system, because the voters can abuse the system and strategically overuse the negative votes. Any candidate who shows a good potential to win will attract negative votes from the supporters of the other candidates. We will have to carefully constrain the voting system to avoid this, which is our goal in constructing the norm-negative voting system. From here on, in the video, we are going to see a lot of numbers, and you might feel that I'm going a bit too fast, so please feel free to pause and rewatch as per your convenience. Now consider a voting method called norm-negative voting, where each voter gets a total of 10 votes and the voter can distribute it among various candidates either as positive votes or negative votes. If a voter spends too many negative votes on a disliked candidate, then there wouldn't be enough positive votes available for the preferred candidate. So, the voters have to ration their negative votes. This is the first level of constraint. Consider an example: four-candidate election with A, B, C, and D. Let's say voter 1 votes 0 for A, plus 7 for B, minus 1 for C, and minus 2 for D. When we add the magnitudes of all these numbers, we should get 10, which is 7 plus 1 plus 2. Voter 2 votes plus 5, minus 3, minus 1, and minus 1. Again, the magnitudes add up to 10, 5 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1. Voter 3 votes minus 5, 0, plus 5, 0, which again adds up to 10. The next step is to add up all the positive votes separately and negative votes separately for each candidate accumulated from all the voters and hold them separately as P and N. In this example, for A, it is plus 5 and minus 5, positive and negative. For B, it is plus 7 minus 3. For C, it is plus 5 minus 2. And for D, it is 0 minus 3. Now that we have collected the P and N for each candidate, let's call P minus N the total support minus the total opposition as the net popularity. And let's call N divided by P as the net polarity of that candidate. A candidate with no negative votes will have zero polarity, be an ideal candidate. If N and P are nearly the same, the polarity would be close to 1. That means the candidate has as many supporters as haters. a very polarizing candidate. Any candidate with polarity greater than 1 should obviously be rejected. As an example, consider the 2020 US presidential election between Biden and Trump. For now, ignore the weaker third-party candidates who also contested in the election. Biden received roughly 80 million votes and Trump received roughly 75 million in the standard plurality voting system. Now imagine what could have happened if negative votes were allowed in this voting. What do you think would have been the total count of positive and negative votes for each of them? Consider the first hypothetical scenario. Let's say Biden gets 60 million positive votes from his supporters, while the remaining 20 million are anti-votes for Trump from voters who dislike Trump. So 60 plus 20 is 80. But when the negative votes are explicitly allowed in this voting system, these 20 million votes would directly go to Trump as negative votes. Then, let's say Trump gets 70 million positive votes from the supporters and 5 million votes are negative votes for Biden. So 70 plus 5 is 75. In this hypothetical scenario, the net popularity is 55 million for Biden and 50 million for Trump. Now consider a different scenario with Biden receiving only 20 million positive votes, while the remaining 60 million are negative votes for Trump, and Trump receiving 65 million positive votes with 10 million negative votes for Biden. In this scenario, the net popularity is only 10 million for Biden and 5 million for Trump. This scenario is much more polarizing than the first one. When there are only two candidates, it doesn't matter whether negative votes are allowed or not, because a negative vote for one candidate is essentially a positive vote for the other. However, when there are three or more candidates, it makes a big difference. For instance, in the second scenario above, where the popularity of both main candidates is quite low, a third-party candidate could have easily received enough positive votes to win. This could actually encourage third-party or independent candidates to contest in the election, especially when they sense high polarization. Now, back to the voting method, let's assume that there are at least three candidates contesting in the election and we have aggregated the total positive and negative votes for each candidate. Now, who wins? The simplest way is to pick the most popular candidate, the one with the highest P minus N. However, it could be smart to penalize candidates who are polarizing, because if a polarizing candidate wins, there will be a lot of heat and friction in the society between the supporters and the haters. So, we introduce a term of 1 plus polarity in the denominator. And now, the candidate with the highest value of W is the winner. To understand the effect of this denominator, consider an example with three candidates A, B, C. A gets a total of 100 positive votes and 40 negative votes. B gets plus 80 and minus 20. C gets plus 50 and 0 negative votes. The popularity for the candidates are 60, 60 and 50 for A, B and C. The polarity N by P is 0.4, 0.25 and 0. W is 42.85, 48 and 50. Notice that A and B have a higher popularity of 60, but candidate C wins the election with just a popularity of 50 because C has a lower polarity. This will have a serious effect on the campaign behavior of the candidates because the candidates would want to avoid accumulating unnecessary negative votes. So automatically the polarizing rhetorics of the candidates will be reduced. At the same time, the voters would have to be very judicious in casting negative votes, else they wouldn't have enough positive votes and it would harm the winning chances of their preferred candidate. In a way, we have incentivized the candidates as well as the voters to behave responsibly. We can also modify the incentive structure by introducing two constants C and B in the calculation of W. These parameters should be fixed by the Election Commission well in advance. By choosing C to be slightly less than 1 like 0.9, we can make the utility of the negative vote to be lesser than the utility of a positive vote when negative votes are overused. This will further incentivize the voters to avoid overusing negative votes. Additionally, to disincentivize strategic negative voting at a population level, we need to constrain C plus B to be less than the total number of candidates minus 1. For instance, if there are only 3 candidates, we need C plus B to be less than 2. To follow the mathematics behind these constraints, please refer to the published article. To highlight the main points, this voting method registers the voter preferences in a much richer format, encourages third-party candidates and levels the playing field for them, and disincentivizes polarizing campaign behavior of the candidates. Some might be concerned that this complicates the voting methodology. Sure, it does. However, in the near future, when the entire process of voting and counting becomes electronic, technology will pacify this concern, and this wouldn't seem all that complicated. For a more elaborate discussion on polarization and comparison with other voting systems, please watch the next video given below in the description.